also talk about my story a little bit and how I ended up here. My story is going to be based around looking for sort of like my dream job, but the way to get there, the road to get there. It's like you piece things together and finally take all those experiences and end up in hopefully a dream job. So Walker and Company, our goal at Walker and Company is to make health and beauty simple for people of color. What that means is, so we are very focused on issues that affect the community, right? So like in people of color, they have this issue with shaving, for example, right? They have razor bump issues. It's called pseudofolliculitis barbae. Whoever can spell that wins a prize. And our first product is called Bevel, which is a three-step shaving solution which takes care of the razor bump issue. So it's not like a mass market product, which like some other companies make, and it's like, here's a shaving solution and everybody uses it, right? We customize it for the community's needs. So I run operations there, which is day-to-day supply chain, manufacturing, and also helping out finance and anything else, because startups is like you wear many hats. All right, so going to my story. My background is in material science, engineering, and chemistry. I started out in Stony Brook University out on Long Island. I don't know if there's any Stony Brook people out here. Woo! One person. All right, we'll connect later. Talk about Stony Brook. So, started at Stony Brook, and a pre-story before that. When I was in high school, I was doing accounting, I was doing chemistry and everything else, and chemistry was like my least favorite subject, right? And my other options were getting into finance and accounting, and I went down that path in high school. This is sort of the British system of education, so I went through the O-level IGCSE, which is a little different than high school and APIJ. So eventually what happened was I went to finance, accounting, didn't like it either. I'm like, okay, I gotta do something. Had a great chemistry teacher, learned a lot about chemistry, and I was like, I love chemistry, right? Got good grades, graduated, ended up in Stony Brook University in the engineering and chemistry program. First class I took, and I'm like, it was chemistry like 101, literally. And I was like, I don't know if I made the right decision. Stuck with it though. I think I called back home once or twice, and I was like, my dad's an accountant. And I was like, Dad, I think I'm gonna change my major back to like accounting. And he goes, don't you dare do that. He was an accountant, and he's always been like, it's not very exciting, and you would probably be a lot better doing something like engineering. So I stuck with it. 3-4 years in, literally doing engineering chemistry. And the reason I'm telling you this is like the things that I've learned along the way. Doing engineering chemistry, there was one class where we had like a 6-hour lab once a week, right? So literally in a lab with our coats on, goggles, Bunsen burners, all the fun stuff. Wow, those are the days. So we're standing there 6 hours, and me and my friend after 6 hours come down in the chemistry building, and we're walking by this board with like all the chemistry alumni and the professors. They're all in their white coats, they've got their goggles in the pocket, and we're like, we just look at each other like, do we want to do this for the rest of our life? Like, we just came out of a 6-hour lab. Do we really want to do this? And literally both of us were like, we need to do something that we're passionate about. And so what ended up happening, went back to my dorm, thought about what I was doing, engineering chemistry, liked it, but once you hit like, I don't know who's taking chemistry here, once you hit like organic chemistry, you're like, you start questioning everything, right? You're like, is this really the best thing? So go home, I love technology. Back then when I was in college, the first iPod had just come out, I think. So it was like iPod, they had the creative MP3 players, and I always loved sort of technology, so I was like, I want to make things. So I'm like, what can I learn? Like, I was already a junior at this point, so third year in college. I'm like, what can I make? What can I do that will lead me into a career where I make things? And so there was mechanical engineering. There was physics major, but that's really not. That's more theory than application. And eventually, what happened was there was a major called engineering science with a track in material science, and it was like you learn manufacturing techniques and you learn all these different cool things of how to machine metal, how to make stuff out of wood. And I was like, that's the major I want. Luckily, I had met all the prereqs doing engineering chemistry. I did spend an extra year, completed engineering chemistry because there was like a few credits left, but also ended up doing engineering science. So two things in my college career that I did were followed my passion. Number two, I know this, you guys are all probably interning soon, have interned sometime in your life. I interned for a professor out there, which I would highly recommend. Let me grab some water, sorry. I would highly recommend. I worked my last year with my engineering science professor under a program with the National Science Foundation. And people always talk, and I don't know if you guys read the blog, but I sent Christine this the other day, was people talk about how success comes when preparation meets luck, right? And what people don't realize is like luck is something which is truly not lucky. Like you put yourself into positions where that luck is sort of luck strikes, right? Like if I hadn't changed engineering science, I would have never met my professor. And when I worked for him, what he did one day was he goes, "You're graduating soon," and this is back in the days, right? When we had like Monster.com and Hot Jobs had just come out. Are they still around? But so I come into office one day and he goes, "I've applied for a job for you," and I'm like, "Oh well, thanks." Like, what did you do? He goes, "Here's a newspaper clipping." Not kidding. We used to apply with newspapers, and I sent your resume over to this company in Connecticut. I had moved my background, so I'm originally from Pakistan, lived in Saudi Arabia, moved to New York for college. So I'm in Long Island right now. He says Connecticut, and I'm thinking, wow, this place must be really far. This is like pre-Google Maps, right? So luckily what happened was that literally 2 days later I got a call from the company. I was just graduating, and they're like, "Yeah, we'd love for you to come in for an interview." Literally went there. First, there was like 4 interviews that day in the same place, and the next day they'd given me an offer, right? So my luck in this story was that I put myself in a position where taking as many opportunities as I can to for my professor then to go ahead and like apply for me. Like that was pure luck, but at the same time it was like if I wasn't in that position, if I hadn't availed that opportunity, I wouldn't have been there. So end up at ASML, and I'm gonna go through my story just because sort of the small lessons I learned, right? So I go to ASML, and it's this company that makes machines that prints microchips. So you can imagine their customers were like Intel and Samsung. So iPhones get skinnier and skinnier because we were making machines that were capable of making smaller microchips every year. Simply put, it's a lot more complicated than that. But so I was there for 5 years. In the beginning, I started off in a research field. So it was more so doing R&D stuff on machines. So I wasn't making the product, but I was like testing the reliability of machines. And it was great. It was a lot of good experience. And what you'll learn from a big company is that when you want to start up, right? A lot of people are starting their first company, or you're working in a new position where a lot of people haven't come from big companies. You're able to take sort of what you learn in big companies, structures, processes, and apply it to startups. So it was great for learning all that. So started R&D, and I was like, I'm still not making stuff. Like, I'm still in a lab, I'm still in a clean room. Super annoying, by the way, you have to put like a clean room suit on. It takes like 18 minutes. Booty, like boots and the goggles. So eventually what happened was I'm like, I need to work in manufacturing. So this is the part where you want to try and set yourself up for what you want to do. And again, luck strikes. What happens, we went through a restructure, and our group was put in the manufacturing department, which is pure luck. But the project I was working on with R&D, I kept vouching and saying, I know this product the most because I've been doing the R&D on this. I want to lead the manufacturing on this, right? And sure enough, a few months later, I was given the project to manufacture the stuff we were working on in a sort of an R&D environment, and it was a new product. So I learned manufacturing processes, and I was finally yes, I'm making something, right? So I got to manufacturing, and 5 to 6 years later, I'm like, so the next thing is I love change. I can't keep doing, and I feel like I don't say our generation, but a lot of us now aren't, the type in the position where back in the days people used to be at a company for 30 years, right? And that was what they wanted to do. They had a good retirement plan. We're on I guess I call it it's almost like career ADD, right? You just want to keep jumping to different things. And when you're young, you can do that. So I was like, I've been in this company for 5 to 6 years, and I don't want to be stuck here, because if I'm here for 10 years, like any other company I go to will be in this industry. Like no one's gonna be like, oh yeah, you have great experience in semiconductors, why don't you come over and make shaving kits for us, all right? So looked hard. LinkedIn, and this is where social media comes in, LinkedIn is a great resource, right? So like I said, back in the days, my first job was applied through a newspaper clipping, and then like periodically I was applying on monster.com and Yahoo Jobs, and the thing with those is like you would apply, I don't know how many, raise your hands if you've applied on Career Builder or like some of the older websites, right? So what you could get is you send your resume, a lot of people might have heard back, but like I didn't hear back anything, right? And you don't, like, it's just your resume is gone and you don't even know if it's sent or not, but it's like, sure, it's gone and you never hear back. LinkedIn was awesome because, or still is, because you go to the job posting, you see who posted it, right? The recruiter, the HR lead, talent lead, and you can then ping them and be like, hey, I applied for this job and I'm just messaging you because I'm super interested, super excited. It's almost like a pre-interview, right? You're showing initiative to reach out to this person. So look for jobs on LinkedIn, finally got one. Wasn't a startup, because startups back then were like more software web-based. It was like Facebook and Twitter. I'm like, I know how to make things, I don't code. So I'm gonna take this job regardless. It's not a startup, I'm gonna take this job regardless because it's gonna lead me to my, like I'll learn from it. The worst thing that can ever happen from a bad situation is you learn from it, right? So it's education anyways. So I take this job, I was there for close to 2 years, and it was a precious metals company, so we were making like stent wire for the medical industry, we were making some of the metals and alloys like platinum gold for the jewelry industry, and what I noticed right away, and this is like key lesson for myself, and was that you need to identify gaps and try to fill those in, right? So I got there, I was an engineer, and I'm coming from a big company where like there was people for every single sort of function, right? So there was like material planners, logistics guys, engineers, and you had like everybody do something very specific. So in this company, I come in and I'm like, okay, I'm an engineer, where's the material planner? And they're like, we don't have one. Where's the process engineer? We don't have one. And I'm like, okay. So you could either take that in a situation where it's like, okay, this is a negative thing, or you could be like, this is an awesome opportunity for me to sort of make my mark on this position and be like, okay, you don't have it, but you know what? I can do process engineering because I came from a manufacturing background. I can do material planning because I worked the material planner in my previous position. I can use those sort of that knowledge and apply it here. So I ended up leading the production team, the manufacturing team there within 2 years, and then started helping them hire people. Because I was like, we need a material planner, we need a process engineer, we need mechanical engineers. So I built out their team for them. And right away I'm thinking one day, I'm like, wow, I came from a company where I was doing one thing all the time to now like, I've actually sort of built a company, right? Because I led the hiring of like 5 people, and they're all still there, which is great, I'm not. But it made that company a lot better in their processes, and they really wanted somebody to help them with that. So all of a sudden now, like on my resume, I'm like, I can put literally like, you take this experience and you're like, I helped build a team, right? Which was not a goal of mine when I started there, but it turned into like an opening spot I could walk into and just take that opportunity. So while I was there, startup, right? So Warby Parker was getting big then. There might be some people here from Warby Parker. And I reached out to a couple people on LinkedIn. I didn't apply for the position. I think they had a VP of supply chain or some kind of position open like 4 years ago. But I'm really big on networking, so even though I didn't apply to that, I reached out to some people on LinkedIn who were really helpful on Warby Parker, and they were like, sure, we'd love to meet you. So I went to their office, I met them, they knew who I was. It didn't work out, because VP of supply chain was sort of a senior position back then as well, but there's nothing wrong with being ambitious, right? But whatever it was, it didn't work out, but at least like I networked with them. I had them on LinkedIn. Every time they posted positions, I saw them on LinkedIn. I think I had 3 or 4 people from there. And now this is where luck strikes again. So I'm sitting at this company with precious metals, and because my LinkedIn profile is updated, because I had sort of the package where it's like, yeah, I'm looking for a position, a recruiter reaches out to me and literally keyword like just, I read them like, this is for me. Like it was like, there's a hardware startup in New York City looking for a supply chain guy, right? And I'm like, this is amazing. Again, it looks like luck, but it's like that person would not reach out to me if I hadn't kept my profile updated, I hadn't put my experiences on there. So sure, it's luck, but he found me because I posted those things. Interesting. So supply chain is where you're in a company and you're managing your suppliers to give you products, from all the way from component level to getting it manufactured to getting it in the warehouse, and from the warehouse to customers. Something I didn't have experience in. But I applied to it because I said to them, and the recruiter that posted it was an external recruiter, not a company HR person. So it was a company called Little Bits. You guys might have heard of it. You've seen some ads in the trains and subways these days. So I applied to it, went to the recruiting office, and they're talking about supply chain. I'm like, look, I've never done supply chain before, but what I have done is I've been on the customer side, and I know how like my customers interacted with me and what they're looking for. Like they're looking to make sure I provide them stuff at good quality, good cost, good price, right timing. And they were like, yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, but we don't really think you're experienced enough for this position. And I said, I convinced them. I was like, agreed, but I still think you should send this resume on, right? Like, I feel like I can do this position. And they're like, okay, we'll forward the resume to the hiring lead, who at that time was the VP of operations at Little Bits, Jane Hoffer. So they sent the resume, speak to Jane on the phone, convinced her somehow that I was capable, and she was really open to it, and she wanted somebody who could sort of grow into the role as well. Went to the Little Bits office, interviewed there, everything went well. Sure enough, like a few days later, I have a job offer. And I've been really lucky with this. Like, I think interviewing skills are really important, and also resume writing skills, where a lot of resumes that I get now when I'm trying to hire people, a lot of people just put down sort of like, I did this because I did this, and then I did this, right? It's very like task-oriented versus what I call achievement-oriented. Like, you want to make sure you put yourselves in positions where you can sort of quantify what you do. So like, I led cost reduction 30%, right? Some way. It's like people read this and like, okay, this is like directly relatable to our situation. We want to reduce cost of our product, and this person can help us do that, rather than saying, I did cost reduction, right? And it's like the 30% you take it out, and people are just like, okay, what does that really mean? How did you do it? And people always just write what they did, not how they do it, which is really, really, really important. So I worked a little bit, and by this time you guys are thinking, wow, I changed jobs quite a bit. But I like change, and when the right opportunity comes, I feel like people should always be on the lookout for what's best for them as well. So I was a Little Bit for nearly 2 years, and doing great. Traveling, supply chain was like, we had suppliers all over the place. I was traveling to China once a month, which I loved. My wife, I'm not sure if she did, but got to travel a lot. I love traveling. I think I've got a pretty good perspective on different cultures, growing up in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, coming from Pakistan, traveling to China, and I sort of like the different cultures. So now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, sure, I'm helping the company in this position, but what can I now do to also sort of build my skills and my portfolio? So now I'm like, okay, you should always be thinking about like, what can I add to my resume? What can I add to my experience? So all of a sudden I'm working with these manufacturers out in different countries, and I'm like, I'm visiting factories, I'm making sure they're capable of doing things, I'm making sure that they're delivering product on time, and now I've sort of added this to my resume and my experience. So doing supply chain, I love doing supply chain, I love manufacturing, like I said. So I was making things, and it was amazing because now I wasn't making things that were just used in like big machines in a factory, but I was getting people who said, oh look, I got the latest Little Bits module, and it was like, oh, I was there to make that first one when it came off the press, and it was very sort of fulfilling to see like people using the product, which is a great product. So I was there for about 2 years, and then again, Tristan Walker, who is also from Stony Brook University, had started a company called Walker & Co Brands. And it seemed exciting to me, but at the same time, I was really happy where I was. His wife and I actually went to school together, like we knew each other from school. So she had written something on Facebook and was like, hey, we're launching Bevel, which is a shaving product. And I sort of just, messaged her and said, congratulations, by the way, if, it's a new company, if you guys ever need any help, or Tristan needs any help or advice in supply chain, I'd love to help. Because I didn't know how many people they had, but they were just launched. So she's like, oh, that'd be really cool. And she put me in touch with Tristan. So we talked, and, for a few months, just like once or twice, we spoke. And one day, literally, I'm like walking out of work, and I get a text message, and it's a link to a job from Tristan. and it says interested question mark. And I'm like, luck strikes again, right? But you put yourself in those positions. So I look at the position and I'm like, this sounds really exciting, but there's no way I'm leaving the greatest city in the world, because our company's based out of Palo Alto, California, and I know Emily feels the same way. So he was open enough to, we had a couple employees here, so he was like, oh no, we could do New York, and it sort of worked out. So what really exciting about this project, or this company, sorry, was, at least for the position I'm in, was we're a small company, right? So you get to do a lot of things in a small company. Like a lot of people come from a big company to a small company, and they're just used to sort of like doing one thing, and that ends up being sort of hard for them to understand that, like in a startup, if you're 10 people and you have 30 things to do, you have to do 3 things each. And what I liked about this position specifically was now I'm not just working on supply chain, which is like ensuring things get made, but I'm working on product development, which is, to me, was a big key part of this position. So just working on a new product, right? Not just getting it manufactured, but thinking of problems and how we can solve them, and then being in the process of designing before it hits supply chain work. And that's what I get to do here. So now all of a sudden I've got like, supply chain experience, I've got product development experience, I've got logistics experience, and I didn't tell you this, but at ASML, my first company, I was trying to get more into the finance side of things and trying to learn of like how are projects mapped out from a resource planning standpoint, right? Like ERP systems, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but it's like enterprise resource planning. It's like this project will cost $80 to do, so we have to sell something at $200. And I was getting really interested in the finance side, so all of a sudden I have finance experience, and like I go into a startup and I'm like, I can wear those multiple hats because I've gone through finance, supply chain, product development, and it's just skills I've sort of acquired over time, and mix them up, and have been able to sort of be in a position where I do love my job. And I go, like, when I was first starting out, and this is a key thing, when I was first starting out, it was sort of like I'd be at work, and eventually after a few years it was sort of like, when is it going to be 5 o'clock? Like, I just want to go home, right? And that's when you know, like, you're not doing something you're passionate about, because a lot of people are just like, 9 to 5 is work, and after that is whatever I want to do. You will know when you're passionate about something when, even after hours, you don't mind getting on that laptop. Not that you have to, but you're like, have a vested interest. Like, I'm making this product, I own this in the startup, I want to do this. And that's when you'll know, like, you're passionate about something, is when, like, work hours, home hours, whatever it is, you feel okay, working. Not that you guys should put in 20 hours, but it's just a sign, right? Versus, it's 5 o'clock, can I go home now? And a lot of people go through that. Quick story of how I got from where I came from. How much time do we have? A few minutes? Okay, good. I was worried I'd be done like in 2 minutes. So the other things that sort of, apart from the skills and how I acquired skills, what keeps me going are, or at least I think I have really good focus, and I keep myself motivated, and I feel like that's a really key thing to be resilient and find ways to motivate yourself. And like, a lot of times what happens, for example, if some of you play sports, how many of you play sports? Raise your hands. Awesome, at least half the room, and a kinda. But you play sports, and what happens is you're getting competitive, and somebody elbows you, and you're just like, I'm gonna dunk on you now, right? Not me, but you get really passionate about it, right? So something happens that motivates you to now sort of do better at your sport and get motivated. And I try to find inspiration in everything. Like, somebody could be like, say anything to me, like, it could be a distraction, but I'm like, you know what, just because that person said something, I'm gonna prove and do it better, or do it my way, or do it something. So like, try to find motivation wherever you can. Motivation is awesome.